2020 has been a mess so far, and with all the different scenarios we've had to adapt to over this past 3 or 4 months, there's a lot of different possible outcomes we can expect from those scenarios. So stick around for the rest of the video. We'll talk about what comes next in SHTF, and we'll talk about what different outcomes we can expect for the rest of 2020. Hey everybody, it's Magic Prepper, and today we're going to talk about what comes next in SHTF, especially here in the year 2020. There's been a lot going on and a lot of different scenarios everybody's had to deal with over the last 4 or 5 months at this point, and we definitely have a lot on our plate when it comes to figuring out what to expect next, okay? So part of preparing is making sure that you can prepare for what is most likely. So we have to look ahead into the future and see what those possible scenarios could be and what those outcomes might look like so we can prepare more wisely. I will say that one positive about 2020 is that it's brought a lot more minds to the preparedness table, okay? A lot more people are prepping now, and I think that's a positive. And if you're here because you just started prepping, or if you're here because you've been prepping for a long time, hit the subscribe button below so that way we can keep talking about what we need to do to be better prepared moving forward, okay? So the thing that really started everything here in 2020, the big catalyst of a lot of what we're dealing with right now, was the pandemic. Now, a lot of other things were already in place to kind of fall apart based on any kind of event similar to the pandemic, but the pandemic was the catalyst this year, okay? So we'll talk about that first, and it has a lot of different possibilities and a lot of different outcomes that we should expect because there's a lot of different ways this thing can go. So right now we are not necessarily in a second wave, but in a spike of the first wave, a resurgence. And a lot of that could be due to a numerous different amount of factors, including additional testing, but we still have to prepare for it as if it is resurging. And what we can expect in the rest of 2020 is a new wave of this pandemic to emerge during the winter. During the colder months, pandemics like this one have a higher survivability rate in the sense of being able to adapt to the environment. So we can expect to see more of this happening in the winter, especially when you combine it with other sicknesses that will be prevalent during that time. During that time, we can also consider to see a lot more restrictions and lockdowns come into place because of that secondary wave. And that's something that we should all be on the lookout for. Regardless of the election, regardless of the results of the election, the leadership change won't happen until January. So we need to make sure that we prepare for it as if we're going to deal with the same factors we know about right now. And if we're going to have a similar response in the sense of lockdowns, restrictions, and mandates that we've already seen happen before. Now, the other thing you can expect with the pandemic is that it won't go away. I don't think it's going to just disappear before then, and I don't think we're going to see it disappear anytime in 2020, okay? There's a lot of different reasons behind that, but that's just my personal opinion. What I do think you'll see is some kind of a cure or some kind of immunization show up, and there will be trial runs, and there will be FDA approvals and all kinds of stuff, but I'm not sure if it's something that's going to be widely accepted. So we're going to see some of that come out. We're going to see it come out of the woodwork. We're going to see how the market and the economy and everything else adapts to that factor. And we're definitely going to see what the legal mandates will be when it comes to requirements for entering businesses or running a business or anything related to the public when it comes to public entities like schools or government buildings. We will see what that means at that time. But I think you can expect to see some kind of a cure, some kind of an immunization before the end of 2020. And it will be a very interesting thing to arrive most likely in an October surprise scenario, something to think about. But those are the things we can expect from the pandemic. Another wave, a resurgence, a combination of other sicknesses, more restrictions, more lockdowns, more mandates once that time comes, and then some kind of a cure or immunization, okay? So that's my expectations for the pandemic right now. That could obviously change, but that's how I'm preparing. I'm expecting those things to happen, so it's helping me prepare for them more wisely in the meantime, okay? So the other thing we have to talk about regarding SHTF style events and more SHTF to come when it comes to 2020 as a year is going to be the unrest we've seen throughout the country. Civil unrest is at a high right now, and we're seeing it spread from city to city, and it just seems like it takes turns from where its focus is. You know, one day it's in Atlanta, the next day it's in Portland. Wherever it might be, civil unrest is something that we have seen occur quite a bit. And my expectation of civil unrest, especially in the sense of addressing it as an SHTF scenario, is that it will escalate through November. It will escalate the closer you get to November. So the closer and closer we get to the election, the closer and closer we get to seeing how the leadership change might go, the more escalation of unrest we could see. And that's how I'm preparing for it, and that's how you should think about it, because in all honesty, the parties involved with the unrest are not going to be satisfied when that time comes, okay? So the results of this election might not even be recognized by a vast swath of the population. And when that happens, the amount of unrest involved with what those results could mean could be extremely high, okay? So we have to prepare now for more of it and for it to escalate in other ways as well, including violence, because what we've seen is that every time you give an inch, they take a mile, right? So anyone involved with any of the unrest that's going on, either side of the aisle can be guilty of this at times. Violence escalates because people are put into desperate situations. And when people feel scared or they feel in fear for their life, things happen that might not have otherwise happened. So we could see an escalation of violence regardless of the outcome of this election, regardless of what the results are, just because things are going to get more and more tense. So I'm preparing for that, and I am trying my best to spread the word on that, because especially those of you who live in the urban areas should at least be prepared for more of that here in the future, okay? So the other thing we have to watch out for here in 2020, because it's such a lovely year, is the economy. The economy was already propped up in a fake way before 2020 even started. There's a lot of people who could have easily predicted that there would be an economic crisis in 2020 because of the fact that they have all these different things laid out in front of us that basically indicate a failure of the system, okay? So the biggest things we have to watch out for is how the economy reacts closer and closer to November, because the instability that's going to create, especially in the market, especially when it comes to the US dollar on a global scale, is going to definitely cause problems on our end, okay? It's going to affect each and every one of us. It's not going to just affect those who are in Wall Street. It's not going to just affect those who trade petrodollars. It's going to affect everybody, because this economy is going to feel that instability. And the more unrest that occurs closer to the election, and the more resurgence we see in the pandemic, the more we can see the economy affected by those things. When people aren't sure about their money, when they're not certain, they get scared and they pull their money back. And that's when you see crashes. And what you can expect is that with the uncertainty of who may or may not be in leadership next time around, and with everything else going on when it comes to the pandemic and the unrest, the economy is going to crumble under its own weight. So I am preparing for the economy to have some sort of a collapse here within 2020. Now, the hope is that it does not collapse, because that could be catastrophic in many ways, but we should be preparing for it as if it will, in order to make sure we have the best leg up when it comes to that situation occurring, okay? So I can expect more instability in the economy, which means more job losses, which means more unemployment, which means more desperate people. We can also expect more shortages, and we can expect people to be even more desperate because of that. So you can see how these things kind of snowball together, but this is my expectation of the economy and the outcome I see for 2020 with the economy, okay? So that's how I'm preparing. Maybe that's how you should prepare as well. The other thing we have to talk about, in order to not make this video last more than 2 hours, is the global tensions around the world right now. And what we're really seeing, and what we should really keep an eye on, is the tension between China and the US, because due to this pandemic and due to the economic instability created by it, China and the US have really high tensions right now, and things are not good. It almost looks similar to the beginning of the last Cold War. And the problem is that China and the US also have an interdependency on each other when it comes to their economies. Our economy definitely relies on China's production, and China's economy relies on US dollars being spent on their products. That's an easy layman's way of saying it anyway. And that is something we have to watch out for, because one of these economies is going to probably tank while the other one is artificially propped up. And when that happens, people like to place blame. They like to point the finger, okay? And when that finger gets pointed, we don't know what's going to happen after that. And the rest of the world is already rearing from the economic impact of the pandemic, and they're also going to rear from the impact of either one of those superpowers to lose their economy due to their input on the world stage based on what they do for GDP and everything else. So that is something we really need to keep an eye on. Escalations are going to happen there, tensions are going to rise, and anytime you have unrest, you have a pandemic or some kind of a large-scale SHTF event, followed by a crumbling economy, you can expect some sort of conflict at some point. And watching what happens between the US and China can help you see what might happen around the rest of the world as well. And that is something that we have to take seriously and we have to be worried about because of the interdependency those two countries share, okay? So, very basic wrap up of what we can expect for the rest of 2020. If you want to go into extreme detail on each event and each scenario that we've adapted to and been dealing with since about March of this year, we can do that at another time. But this is just an outline for you to try to prepare for those things to come, the possible outcomes, the expectations. That's how we prepare more wisely, and that's how we can see what we might be facing down the road, okay? So hopefully that helps you guys. Hopefully that helps everyone's preparedness kind of be a little bit more focused. If you have any other questions or any other input about what we can expect for some of these different scenarios, leave it in the comments below, because I get a lot of great information down there. I know a lot of you have gotten great information down there, and it's great how this community wants to share with each other. And yes, even if you think I'm wrong or if you think that I misspoke about a certain type of situation, go ahead and let me know in the comments below. I don't get offended. I, in fact, try to see if maybe I was wrong, and I try to research it so I can be better prepared. So thank you for that. If there's anything else you need to ask or anything else you want to add, always in the comments. And without anything else to say about what comes next in SHTF, that's going to be it for Magic Prep.